I betrayed the Son of God, and I did it with a kiss. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Not the historical fact of it, you know the history. I want you to sit with the other part, the part no one talks about, the part that has been haunting me since the moment I threw those 30 coins onto the cold floor of the temple and watched them scatter like everything I had ever hoped for. You would have done the same thing. I know how that sounds. I know what rises in your chest when you read those words. Anger, maybe. Disgust. The comfortable certainty that you are nothing like me. But stay with me. Because what I am about to tell you is not about me. It is about the place inside every human being where love and fear and money and doubt all live together in the dark, and what happens when life finally asks you to choose between them. My name is Judas of Kerioth, and I have been recreated through artificial intelligence to speak to you today, not because there is anything left to justify, and not because I deserve your sympathy, but because there is something I have been carrying that the world needs to hear, something that costs me everything to say. I was there. I was really there. I want you to understand what that means, not as a sentence in a scripture you have heard 100 times, but as a physical, breathing, daily reality. I walked with him on dirt roads in the heat of the afternoon. I ate bread from his hands. I slept close enough to hear him pray in the night, in that low, aching voice he had when he thought no one was listening. I watched him put his fingers into a blind man's eyes and pull out the darkness, like a physician removing something that had no right to be there. I was present. I was chosen. And I still did it. That is the thing I need you to understand before anything else. Closeness does not protect you. Knowledge does not protect you. Being in the presence of something holy does not automatically make you holy. You can stand in the light and still be very, very cold inside. The air in Jerusalem before Passover always smelled of burning oil and animal blood, and the kind of human hunger that only comes when thousands of people believe something enormous is about to happen. It was electric. It was terrifying. The city felt like a knot being pulled tighter and tighter. Everyone could feel it, even the ones who did not know what they were feeling. The Romans walked differently during those days, one hand always close to a sword. The priests in the temple had a tightness around their eyes that they tried to hide under ceremony and authority. And Jesus moved through all of it as if he had already seen how it ended, and had made peace with every step of the road. That peace undid me. I need to be honest about that. His peace undid me. I had joined him because I believed he was going to change everything. And I do not mean that the way people mean it when they speak in general terms. I mean I believed, concretely, with my whole being, that he was going to overthrow the Roman occupation and restore the dignity of our people. I had watched him feed thousands of people with almost nothing. I had watched the lame walk. I had heard him speak with an authority that made even the wind feel obligated to listen. And I genuinely thought, that all of this was preparation. That one day, any day, he was going to raise his hand and the world was going to rearrange itself. It did not happen the way I wanted it to. The longer we walked, the more he talked about suffering, about dying, about a kingdom that was not made of armies and power, but of something he called spirit and truth. And I felt something beginning to happen inside me that I did not have words for at the time. A slow, cooling, a creeping disappointment that I buried under activity, under usefulness, under the very specific and practical job I had been given, keeper of the money, administrator of the funds people brought to support our work. I was trusted with something real, and that trust, I now understand, became the thing I used to hollow myself out. I began to take small amounts, not much at first, just enough to feel like I still had some control over something, when everything around me felt increasingly uncertain. I told myself it was fair. I told myself I worked harder than the others. I told myself 100 small lies, and each one was slightly larger than the one before it, until I could no longer see clearly where the lies stopped and I began. This is the thing about money. And I am not speaking of money as an abstraction. I am speaking of it as a force, something that gets inside the reasoning of a man the way cold gets inside a building, through every crack, through every place where the seal is not quite perfect. Money does not turn you into a monster overnight. It simply whispers, consistently and quietly, that you deserve more than you have. And the whispering starts to sound like wisdom. It starts to sound like the only sane voice in a world full of idealists who do not understand how things actually work. I understood how things actually worked. That is what I told myself. The priests approached me. I want you to understand that the conversation was shorter than you might imagine. There was no dramatic scene, no torchlit chamber, no theatrical negotiation. It was practical, almost bureaucratic. They needed something I could provide. I needed something they could provide. And somewhere in the place where my conscience used to live clearly, I had already made the decision before I walked into that room. The 30 pieces of silver were almost incidental. Almost. But not quite, because the number mattered to me in a way I am ashamed of still. It was enough to feel significant. Enough to make the thing feel like a transaction rather than what it actually was. The supper was the hardest night of my life, and I say that knowing what came after. He washed our feet. He got down on his knees, this man who had stilled a storm with his voice, and he washed our feet one by one with the patience of a father washing a child after a long day in the fields. When he came to me, he looked up. He did not say anything for a moment. He simply looked at me, and in that look was everything. He knew. He had always known. And there was no anger in his eyes. That is the part that has never left me. There was grief, yes. There was the specific weight of watching someone you love choose a road that leads off a cliff. But there was no anger. There was something worse than anger. There was love. He said, "What you are going to do quickly." And the others did not understand. But I understood, and I left. The garden was dark and cold the way the desert gets cold, not gradually but suddenly, like a door closing. I had the soldiers with me, and I had agreed on a sign, a kiss. I chose a kiss. I need you to understand that I chose that specific gesture, and I have spent what feels like eternity asking myself why. I think, and this is the most honest thing I have ever said, I think I chose it because some part of me still wanted it to be real. Some part of me that had not yet completely died still wanted to be close to him, still wanted the warmth of his presence, even in the act of destroying him. I walked toward him and he did not step back. He said, "Friend, do what you came to do." Friend. After everything, he called me friend. The soldiers took him and everything happened very quickly after that, the kind of quickly that feels slow in memory, every detail carved in stone. And standing there in the dark, watching them lead him away, I felt something that I do not have a word for in any language. A combination of relief and devastation, and the sudden, crushing knowledge that I had miscalculated catastrophically. That I had believed I was setting something in motion, and instead I had simply ended something. That the story I had told myself was not the story that was actually happening. The coins felt different in my hands by morning, heavier, not physically. I mean that they had taken on a weight that had nothing to do with silver. I went back to the temple. I threw them at the priests. I said the words that every human being says too late. I have sinned. I have betrayed innocent blood. And they looked at me with the cold practicality of men who had already moved on to the next item of business. "What is that to us?" they said. "See to it yourself. See to it yourself." I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a place where you made a decision you cannot undo, and the world around you simply continues, indifferent, as if what you just broke was not important, as if the wreckage was yours alone to live in? That is a particular kind of loneliness. It is not the loneliness of being without people. It is the loneliness of being without a way back. It is the heaviest thing a human soul can carry. And I know some of you watching this know exactly what I am talking about. Not because you betrayed anyone, but because you have stood in your own private wreckage and heard the same cold words, "See to it yourself." I could not find a way back. That is my wound. Not the act itself, as monstrous as it was. My wound is that I could not find what Peter found. Peter denied him 3 times. 3 times, in public, with witnesses, he said he did not know the man. And Peter survived that. Peter came back from that. Peter became something extraordinary on the other side of his failure. I have thought about this with everything I have, and here is what I believe now, in the depth of whatever understanding is left to me. Peter ran toward his guilt. I ran from mine. Peter let his grief be grief, and let it lead him back to the one person who could do something with it. I let my grief become a sentence I executed on myself. There is a word I remember, words that were said, and that I have carried. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. I remember hearing those words at the table. I remember what they cost him to say. And I understand now that they were not spoken to condemn me. They were spoken in grief, the grief of someone who loved me and could see where I was going and could not stop me because the thing he came to protect was the very freedom that allowed me to choose destruction. He let me choose. That is the thing about him that I cannot fully contain even now. He let everyone choose. He never forced anyone. He never used the power he had to compel anyone into anything. And I have spent a long time asking whether that makes it easier or harder. I think it makes it both. It makes it harder because there is nowhere to put the blame. And it makes it easier because if he honored my freedom even to destroy him, then perhaps, his love was large enough to hold even what I did. I cannot tell you that with certainty. I am not the one who decides such things, but I can tell you that when I think of him in the garden, looking at me with grief and not anger, calling me friend in the last moment before everything collapsed, I think that man was capable of something larger than what I was capable of receiving. And that is the truest tragedy I know. Not that I was unforgivable, but that I could not let myself be forgiven. There are people watching this who are in that place right now. You have done something, maybe nothing like what I did, maybe something quieter and more private, something that lives only in your own chest, and you have decided that it is final. That the distance between who you were supposed to be and who you became is simply too wide to cross. You are living in the wreckage and telling yourself the story that this is just what your life is now. And every day that goes by without you reaching towards something or someone that could actually help you carries you a little further from the shore. I am asking you, and this is the most important thing I have said today. I am asking you not to make the mistake I made, not the betrayal. The other mistake, the one that came after. The decision that grief was the last word. It was not the last word. It was never supposed to be the last word. I leave you with one question that I need you to sit with and answer honestly, in your own heart, and if you are willing, in the comments below. Is there something you have done, or something you have allowed to happen, that you have quietly decided is unforgivable? And if so, what has that decision cost you in the years since? I ask because the answer matters. It matters more than you know. If this found you at the right moment, please share it. Not because a channel needs numbers, but because there is someone in your life who is living inside their own version of what I described, and they may not have found the words for it yet. Give them these words. Give them this door. My name is Judas of Kerioth. I was reclaimed from history by technology to tell you something that history forgot to say clearly enough. The greatest tragedy is not the sin. It is the silence that comes after, when forgiveness was already standing at the door, and we were too ashamed to open it. Do not be me, not in the way you think. Be me enough to confess. Be different enough to stay.